Good afternoon, everyone. We are here on Vanderbilt Avenue. My name is Jackson Chabot. I'm the Director of Public Space Advocacy at Open Plans, a nonprofit that advocates citywide for public space. We're really excited here to have a few phenomenal guests. We've got a few great questions, but I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Saskia Haegens. I am the Vice Chair of the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Council, and we organize the Vanderbilt Open Street.
I'm Antonio Reynoso, and I'm the Brooklyn Borough President, and love Vanderbilt. So.
And I'm Sam Sklar. I run a newsletter called Exasperated Infrastructures, where I'm exasperated about infrastructure.
So the first kickoff question is for the two of you, for Saskia and Borough President Reynoso. How do you see your role as it relates to public space, mobility, and accessibility for Brooklyn and for Vanderbilt? So let's start borough-wide, and then we'll come back to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, so I think the first part and the most difficult part is introducing public space and people not feel like it's encroachment. I think a lot of folks, want to participate in the decision-making on whether or not a street should go in, but because they've never seen it, they've never experienced it, many times it's met with pushback. So my job, I guess, is more of like an ambassador, an advocate. That if we're going to do it, let's do it, and let's do it right. What we're seeing in some of these communities related to like equity is that they do it, DOT doesn't really follow up, there's no real volunteer program, and then it becomes very sloppy. And because of that inconsistency, it gives easy fodder to the people that want to push back to say, we told you it doesn't work. So that's something that I think I have to do, is when it happens and when we introduce it, that we do a good job at introducing and maintaining it in an effort to make it so that in places that don't have these spaces, that they can be successful. So I would say that that's part of it.
Yeah, I think the consistency is a big part. I think one of the reasons Vanderbilt is so wonderful is because it is consistent. So Saskia, I'd love to hear your opinion and what kind of that takes.
Right, so I first want to point out Vanderbilt is a volunteer-run open street. We are a volunteer community organization that took it upon ourselves to run Vanderbilt as well as the Underhill Open Street. We think that's one of the things, the community approach, what makes Vanderbilt unique, but it's also a big operation. We have, I think, between the two open streets, at least about 100 volunteers that have pitched in, some moving barriers every now and then, some spending many hours each week making this a success, which I guess that already tells you the enormous amount of labor and love that goes into it, a bit of frustration as well. I think the Open Streets program gave us sort of a unique opportunity to do something really transformative that otherwise probably would never have happened. If we had told people a few years ago, we're going to close down the street, dine in the street, have people picnic, kids playing on Vanderbilt, I don't think people would have believed us or would have believed in it or would have even supported it. But the Open Streets program gave us the opportunity to just do that. Then people saw it, they loved it, and now we have a lot of support. The majority of people in the neighborhood and surrounding support this program. I think part of it is because they have seen it and they've enjoyed it. And I think that's one thing that's making this work now. So it's sort of a unique opportunity to do that.
That's amazing. Sam?
What opportunities do you see for open streets and public space going forward? Let's maybe start with Vanderbilt.
I think this showed people what we can do with public space, right? How we can use public space in a different way than we're often used to. Like this on a weekday is a very busy street with traffic everywhere. Now it's effectively a plaza. But that being said, it's also currently not available everywhere. There's a lot of neighborhoods missing out, and I think the big opportunity or the big challenge is to make sure it's distributed equitably throughout the borough.
You're going to the next question. Jumping ahead on us. Borough President, what do you think the opportunities are? Looking across the borough, there are some communities that have a lot of public space. We have Prospect Park just up the way. We've got Fort Greene Park in the other direction, but that is unique in the sense of the borough, and there are some communities that just don't have yet. So what do you think the opportunities are?
Yeah, I think it's building good models, right? And I actually want to move from open streets to public plazas, right? Like really transforming it. This happened in other cities, in other countries, like Barcelona took one of the most busiest streets that they had and just turned it into a public plaza, and it was a huge success. So you see in areas where there are more like open streets, pedestrian and bike-friendly council members, they have more open streets. It's not, it was very black and white. And if a council member didn't want one that was being introduced by DOT, there would be a lot of conversations about letting it happen. So there were some open streets in areas where it was objections by the council member, and in some of those cases they shut them down because there was like proactive support to shut it down. And without an elected official trying to promote it or push it, it's hard for it to be sustained. So I would just say the goal here is to eventually have Vanderbilt become a public plaza, and the ones that are successful become public plazas. And once people see that model, there'll be people from other parts of Brooklyn, in central Brooklyn, in East New York, they'll come to Vanderbilt one day and say, wow, this is amazing. The first thing they'll say is, why is this not in my neighborhood? And they'll be like, it can be. Talk to your elected official so we can start getting to work on it. So again, we need one hugely successful model, and once we have that, I really feel like it can spread.
Because that's actually sort of a key point here. As much as we love running this, we also have a lot of questions like, what will this look like X years from now, right? Like, it's fun to do this with a group of volunteers, but it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of labor. We have to find funding for the program. I don't know for how long that's sustainable. Or let me put it differently, I don't think that's long-term a sustainable model. We put up, let's say 90 barriers, 90 of these metal barriers, 3 days a week from April through November. That's about 100 days that we're moving 90 barriers into the street and out of the street. It's fun, but it's also, at some point we need to move to something more permanent, both in terms of the operational component of it, but also sort of what the street looks like.
A lot of people think that there's no money in this city for anything, but there is. There's just priorities and how we set them and political will, and we don't necessarily have that right now. This mayor seems to be a lot more bike friendly per se, and maybe that's a way to get in, but hopefully bringing him to Vanderbilt, seeing the success in Vanderbilt inspires him. And I'll give an example of how priorities are set. We have a ferry system that is deeply subsidized by the city of New York that's helping a very small population in our city that seems to be very affluent and privileged. And then we have this where there's a ton of equity. It's absolutely free. That means it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, you can walk down this street and enjoy it. This is where the money should be or could be. That's just one angle. We got to be very careful. A lot of people want to see City Bike expanded, and City Bike gets subsidized as well. We're having 1 million riders a day when the weather is warm. So that's also something that we could be prioritizing. So I think a lot of it is political will. We got to be very careful about, who our leaders are. You want somebody that cares about this, that can make a difference, then you got to elect those people. And if you don't, then we're just going to have to wait another 4 years, another 8 years, or fight tooth and nail for something that is so practical and makes so much sense for us.
How do both of you think that the city and the Department of Transportation can support, educate, and bring along business owners who might have business owners say, I don't see the benefit of open streets yet?
It's data and information. One thing that business owners care about is the bottom line. Can we show them that having an open street is actually good for their business, that it is actual economic development? On Grand Street, for example, where I'm from, where they didn't want the bike lanes to be put in, and they said that they needed the parking spaces because that's how they get their customers. We do a survey, and 86% of the people get there by walking, public transportation, or cycling, and that the cars are actually just business owners, and sometimes the workers just constantly feeding meters, and they're not turning over spaces. So it isn't, there's this perception from these business owners that these parking spots were valuable for them and brought them business, and that's not the case. But what can bring them business are these type of environments. The outdoor dining was,
legislation that you champion. So yes, big ups there.
Thank you. And it was great because I was able to show these small businesses that care about parking over everything, unless it's their spot. It's like, no, we can use those 2 parking spots to give you 10 tables and 20 chairs to be able to give your food outdoors. We'll expand your square footage for your business and see how much money you can make. Now, making it that's one thing, having the outdoor dining space. But after that is actually having the foot traffic and showing that people want to be in these type of spaces and that you end up being, a central corridor for your community. That is valuable, that is real.
Absolutely. Saskia, before the conversation, we were talking about this question a bit, both from the business owner perspective, as well as the jobs benefit of public space management and the marshals that you all have hired. So I'm curious if you could speak to both of those angles.
Right, yeah. For the first part, definitely want to echo what Antonio was saying. Talk to the restaurants on Vanderbilt. We have about 25 businesses directly participating in the program. They will all tell you that Open Streets saved them during the pandemic, and so, yeah, they're relying on this to this day. So that's, you can collect those data. We've done some counts ourselves last year in the spring, sort of in terms of how many pedestrians and cyclists are coming through, just also to show like sort of the traffic that we're attracting. We get hundreds and hundreds of cyclists per hour. Of course, some are passing through, so it also functions as a safe bike lane, but a lot of them are also stopping here, right? Vanderbilt is a destination as well in that regard. So it attracts a lot of people. Vanderbilt has become a destination because of Open Streets. The labor component, so as I mentioned, we're a volunteer organization. What we realized after the first year is that setting up 100 barriers, 90 to 100 barriers every weekend, 100 times a year is a lot of work. So we've hired marshals who assist us with that. So it's a combination of paid marshals. We have 5 or 6 people working with us now every weekend. The restaurant staff also assist in that, and we have a bunch of very dedicated volunteers who like lifting barriers. So it's a combination of components. So we have 6 marshals that help with the setup and breakdown, which it's a lot of work. It takes about an hour to open the Open Street, so basically like close it to traffic. It takes up to an hour to wrap up at the end of the day. And then during the day they circulate, make sure barriers aren't moved, help out with sanitation as well, and are sort of the presence on the street.
Those are all great things, and I think speak to the potential and the challenges of the Open Street. Sam, over to you.
So what advocacy and policy tools do we have to continue this work that elected officials can do, people who are marshaling these streets and helping to organize them?
There is a very clear separation or distinction between like what's happening here and what's happening in some other parts of Brooklyn. And the other parts of Brooklyn are, more black and brown and poor, and the conversation is that they don't want it or that they don't like it. And if that's happening, no amount of people that are running up and down Vanderbilt are going to be able to make a difference. It's going to be more white affluent faces kind of making a case to black and brown people that they should have this, which is why I think the best advocacy is showing people in those areas that it works. So it's doing a good job here. Throwing events that would attract those types of people. Are we doing Afro-Latin jazz? Are we doing Afro-Caribbean work here? Are we throwing events, hip-hop and R&B, that are more culturally aligned with what's happening in Central Brooklyn to bring people from there to here? And once they see it, once they experience it, then they can bring it to their communities. The advocacy that I would say should exist is figuring out a way to bring people that don't have access to this to here and making that a part of the programming in an aggressive way.
One more question I have is, what can an everyday New Yorker do to support the Open Street program, Open Spaces?
Talk to your elected officials. Tell them to support it. Tell them to back it. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
Sounds simple.
Yeah, and show up. Actually go to the Open Street. Frequent it. Make sure you're like a positive contributor to the greater good here. Vanderbilt is successful because regular people decided that they were going to do something about it. So emulate that, model that, and other ones can be successful.
Favorite public space? We'll put it in New York, and we'll put it in Brooklyn for the sake of the context.
Vanderbilt Open Street.
It's a Lithuanian square or a Lithuanian triangle.
So maybe not my favorite, but my most recent favorite was Calvert Vaux Park, which is down in very deep South Brooklyn, in between Gravesend and like the Coney Island Peninsula.
Absolutely. All right, last one. Most memorable chance encounter in public space. I'll kick it off here. There's this guy that I now know is a friend, but we met on the bike lane just before Kent Avenue going into North Brooklyn. And he's an artist, and so I followed him on Instagram, and now I see him all over the city biking. So he's my biking friend from the chance encounter. Because
I'm the borough president, but I was just a council member, a lot of people recognize me, and it's a lot of fun. Most of them are just telling me to wear a helmet in a good way. It's like, Reynoso, you have to wear a helmet, but it's always running into constituents. And I think the cycling community loves to see me on my bike, and when they see me, they're just like, you're really on a bike? And it's like, yes, I do this every day. This is kind of how we live. And just running into my constituents, running into Brooklynites is awesome. So those are my chances.
Still hoping for a Spike Lee sighting on Vanderbilt Avenue.
Yes,
Maybe he's behind me.
Come on, Spike.
Nope.
No, not yet.
Not yet. All right, so with that, we'll wrap it up. We appreciate everyone in the crowd here as well. Appreciate all of you here, and we're going to take a little stroll on Vanderbilt. So with that, we're out. Thank you.